I'm Mr. Issa, teacher for social studies at Ansaaru Nursery and Primary School, specifically Al Majroon Center. Welcome back, my dear learners and those who are viewing me. Kindly, as we forge ahead, I want you to cooperate with me. So, let me just pick up from where I stopped yesterday. On that note, fellow pupils, when I was here, I introduced topic 5 of social studies, that is class 8, which touches on political development and systems. Remember, yesterday when I was here, I gave out the breakdown of what you are supposed to do, or rather to understand as a candidate, all the way from class 5, where I tackled specifically the Wanga Kingdom and the Ameru Council of Elders. That is class 5 work. In class 6, my dear pupils, you are supposed to be able also to understand, that is Eastern Africa, under political development and systems. Just as a reminder, I said you must be able to understand about the Baganda Kingdom and the Nyamwezi Chiefdom. That is class 6 work. Class 7 work, I said here that you are supposed to be able to understand. You are supposed to be able to read and understand the old Ghana Kingdom and also the Khoisan. Then in class 8, still the same topic, political development and systems. Number 1, I say that in this case, we shall be looking at activities of early political associations in Kenya before 1939. So when I was here yesterday, the only thing that I wrote, just as a reminder, already I had written, I said that Kenya, as you know, I said first of all that in 1895, this was the year Kenya was declared a British protectorate. So I understand that you learned in class protectorate. I know you learned this in class 5, but just as a reminder, remember, in 1895, the leadership of Kenya was still under the Governor General. Now, just to emphasize, a protectorate meant that at that time, power was being shared 50-50. By this I mean that some Kenyans, we as Kenyans, we were sharing with the British government. That is, 50% of power was in our hands. On the other hand, 50% of power was in the British. But when it reached the year 1920, that is when things changed. What happened? I say that Kenya was now declared a British colony. Now, what's the difference between a protectorate and colony, pupils? Just like I've said that at least under protectorate, we had some privileges, or rather some powers. But when it reached the year 1920, Kenya was declared a colony, meaning that British controlled us fully. In short, we were fully colonized. from the word colony. That meant that Kenya was fully colonized. Because of that, colonization came with serious or negative effects, which I mentioned yesterday. So yesterday, I talked about the negative or bad effects of colonial rule in Kenya. Of course, I talked of forced labor, forced taxation, poor working conditions, harsh, Africans were subjected to harsh working and even living conditions. So on that note, that was just a reminder of yesterday's work. So allow me now to look at, okay, before I forget, I went ahead and talked about examples of early political associations, in Kenya before 1939. Remember, I'm moving slowly by slowly because this topic is somehow, some pupils tend to take this topic as a hard topic. No, I want to state here categorically that this is among the simplest topics in SST. So let nobody cheat you that this one is a hard topic. No. So on that note, remember yesterday I emphasized that why are we looking at 1939, before 1939, and not saying 1940? This is the reason. You know, we had the First, the Second World War. Now, the Second World War at this time, just like I said yesterday, it began between 1939 to 1945. So, in 1939, all activities of any associations all over the world were banned. That means that they were stopped immediately or with an immediate effect. So people are just concerned on how to fight during the war, and therefore that is why we are now in class 8. We are supposed to look at those political associations in Kenya before 1939. Generally, I remind again, I say number one, we had what we call the Kikuyu Association, the Kikuyu Association. This one was the first political association in Kenya, which was formed in 1920. And just like I said, after I finish the roles and duties, I'll come back to look at them one by one. Then number two, we had what we call the young Kikuyu Association. The young Kikuyu Association. Brackets, we talk of YKA. So Y for young, K for Kikuyu, and A association. The Young Kikuyu Association. Now, this one, actually it was formed in the year 1921. This one was formed in the year 1921 by none other than Harry Duku. But we shall be looking at them one by one. Then we shall note down the members as we move. Then number three, we also had an association known as the East. That is the East. Sorry. We had an association known as the East African Association. The East African Association. If you want to avoid boredom, you just talk of the EAA. Now, the reason why it is known as the East African Association, it is because members were from East Africa. For example, we had members from Kenya, Tanzania, and all the way to Malawi. So this one was referred to as East African Association. And as we shall be looking at the associations one by one, remember this one, initially, members from the Young Kikuyu Association, decided to accommodate other members. So what they did, they just changed the name from Young Kikuyu Association to East African Association. The reason is that they wanted to accommodate several views, or rather they wanted to accommodate different members from different places, because they understood the best way to tackle white rule was to unite together. So just like the Young Kikuyu Association, the East African Association again was led by none other than Harry Duku. So from East African Association number 4, we had we also had what we call we had the Kavirondo. We had the Kavirondo tax welfare. The Kavirondo tax welfare association, the Kavirondo Tax Welfare Association, which was also called the Young Kavirondo, the Young Kavirondo Tax Welfare, the Young Kavirondo Tax Welfare Association. So, my dear candidates, this one was another political association which was formed in Kenya just to try and counteract the influence of British rule in Kenya. It was known as the Kavirondo Tax Welfare Association, or the Young Kavirondo Tax Welfare Association. You can just, in short, we talk of the K Kavirondo Tax, then Welfare Association, or we can talk of the Young Kavirondo Tax Welfare Association. So this one actually, it was formed in the year 1922. It was formed in the year 1922, and it mainly comprised of members from Central Nyanza, North Nyanza, and South Nyanza. So on that note, their main leader was none other than Jonathan Okwiri. But just like I've said, we shall be looking at them one by one, because this one is an important area. So just allow me first of all to look at the general points, then I will come back and look at them, or rather discuss them one after the other. Now, just a point of reminder, the East African Association, if I check my notes, the East African Association was also from the same year, that is 1921. Remember, I've said that it was just like animals moving from one forest to the other. Why? The members of Young Kikuyu Association are, most of them, when we will be writing down the members, you will find that the members who are in the Young Kikuyu Association they just jumped from this association, then they joined East African Association. Maybe it is not in the syllabus, but for the sake of my learners, I want to state here that we also had another political association. We also had another political association known as the Ukambani Members Association. We had the Ukambani Members Association. Now this one, the Ukambani Members Association, this one was formed in the year 1934. This one was formed in the year 1934 by a leader known as Muhindi Mbingu. If you remember, those of you Muhindi Mbingu. So on that note, first of all, if you have ever been along the streets of Nairobi, we have a street known as Muhindi Mbingu Street. That street was named after this leader. This was the reason. he decided to mobilize his people all the way from Ukambani to come here in Nairobi, near the Central Police Station, then demonstrate at that place. When they reached there, they met face to face with the colonial administrators. Then they were punished severely. So that is why that area along the central, or rather opposite the Central Police Station, that is why that street was named Mwindimbingu Street. Reason was that. And why did he mobilize his community to come and demonstrate here in Nairobi? The Europeans, or rather the white people, never wanted Africans to practice what we call overstocking. So that policy really angered Mwindimbingu and his people. So generally, they were against what we call, the reason why UMA, that is Ukambani Member Association, was formed, was that it was against what we call destocking policy. It was against destocking policy. And just like I've explained, this meant that Africans were supposed to reduce the number of livestock they had. In class 8, I want to emphasize what we are supposed to know in the syllabus. You check in your book, they began with the Young Kikuyu Association. Okay. I see we also have another political association which was known as the Kikuyu Central Association. So we also had the last association was Kikuyu Central Association, the Kikuyu Central Association. In small, you can just talk of KCA. That is K for Kikuyu, C for Central, and A for Association. Now, this one was formed by members of the Gema community, and it was led by, first of all, it was formed in 1925. This one was formed in 1925. It was formed by a leader by the name Joseph Kangede. Just like I've said, I'll give you an assignment where you'll get the members of those associations just to copy. Because the members, you'll find that an association has like 15 members. So on that note, because the members are well written in the textbook, that one I'll just give you humble time just to copy, or rather to write them from the textbook. But for now, the key issue here is that this association was formed in 1925. Their main leader was Joseph Kangede, on that note. Now, I have said that it mainly comprised of Gema people. Now, when I talk about Gema, in Kenya, you have been hearing of Gema now and then. The word Gema simply means G, that is Gikuyu, then Embu, then Meru. And then lastly, we have Akamba. So G for Gikuyu or Kikuyu, E for Embu, then M, Meru or Ameru, and lastly we have Akamba. But mostly it was made up of the Gikuyu, Embu, and Ameru. That one was the Kikuyu Central Association, which was formed in the year 1925 by Joseph Kangede. You can see when you look at the trend of these associations, you'll agree with me that most of them are touching about Kikuyu. This is the reason. When I began this lesson yesterday, I said that when the Europeans came in Kenya, they took what we call African fertile land, which were known as the White Highlands, or Crown lands. The White Highlands or Crown lands. So, my dear pupils, I want to state here that most of the fertile areas in Kenya are areas around Mount Kenya region. And you can bear with me that crops like coffee, crops like pyrethrum, crops like tea, they are grown in those areas. Why? The area have fertile red volcanic soils. And in addition, the cool and wet climate which favors agriculture. So that is why they came and concentrated in those areas. So most community, the community that was mostly affected was the Agikuyu community. That's why you can see they are spread all over Kenya. And in fact, just to the 2019 census, there are now 8.1 million people. That is the Gikuyu people. Why? When they were displaced, they had to move to other areas. So that is it. Now, so let me just come to my general points. I want now to move to the reasons. I want to highlight the reasons. The reasons. So on that note, why were these associations formed? So we must be able to understand the reasons or the whys or the aims. You call it, you can also call them the objectives. The objectives of early political associations. The reasons or the whys or the aims or objectives of early political associations in Kenya. I've combined all of them because we were Africans fighting a common enemy. So we'll find that the reasons why Kikuyu Association was formed is the same reason why the Young Kikuyu Association was formed. Is the reason why the East African Association was formed up to Kikuyu Central Association. So on that note, these are the general reasons or whys or objectives that made Africans in Kenya to form these political associations. Number one, most of them, they were what we call they were against land alienation. They were against land alienation or loss of land. You know, the land issues. The land issues is a very thorny issue in the Republic of Kenya. That is why the other day when I was looking at the government of Kenya, I think I said that even among the courts of Kenya, we specifically have a court that was established, that is the Land and Environment Court, just to look at matters concerning land in Kenya. And also in our Constitution of Kenya, Chapter 5 talks about land and environment. So on that note, this one was the main reason for main political association. So I'll urge my candidates, when you are writing, you place this star, and of course you just write the main, because I know they'll bring four reasons or whys. Then they'll ask you, because you are a candidate, they'll say which one of the following was the main reason for the formation of political associations in Kenya before 1939. So my dear learners, this one was the main reason, that Africans wanted back their land, or they were against land alienation or loss of land. Number two, we also had they were against heavy taxation. They were against forced or heavy taxation. They were against forced taxation. Remember, Africans were to work on European farms from morning to evening. The reason to get money, that money could be used to pay tax. That is the poll and hard tax. So like the Young Kavirondo Tax Welfare Associations, they went ahead and demanded that women, for example, should be allowed not to pay tax, or women to be exempted not to pay tax. So this one was a common feature. This one was a common characteristic, or other reason or why. Then number three, that they demanded for political leadership. Demanded for political leadership. They demanded for political leadership. Now, remember, very soon we shall be looking at the LegCo, which means the Legislative Council or Parliament, which was formed in 1907. Before 1939, all the members, when I talk about the LegCo in full simply means Legislative Council or Parliament. So, what I'm saying is that when you look at the leaders who are in the LegCo, all the way from 1906 when it was formed up to 1939, there was no single African. All of them were Europeans. So Africans, this matter really annoyed Africans. They also wanted one of their own to lead them in the LegCo. So that is why, that brings the point, they demanded for political leadership, and especially in the Legislative Council or Parliament. They also wanted to protect African culture and traditions. They wanted to protect African, they wanted to protect African culture. They wanted to protect African culture and traditions. As you see, those people, when they came, they viewed Africans as primitive people. That one really annoyed Africans. So Africans wanted to retain their culture. Another issue here is that Africans wanted to be allowed, they wanted to be allowed to grow cash crops. They wanted to be allowed to grow cash crops. So these associations, some of them, especially those around Mount Kenya, the likes of the Kikuyu Central Association, they wanted that Africans must also be given chance to grow cash crops like coffee and even tea. Why? Initially, the white people or the Europeans had thought that if they allow Africans to grow these crops, then they will lack people to work on their farms. They also wanted better education, better education for Africans, Now, what does this mean? When these people came, education in Kenya was on racial lines, whereby we had European schools like Alliance High School. That one was mainly meant for Europeans. We had Asian schools like Parkland schools. That one was for Asian people. Then African schools like Jericho Secondary, just near Makadara. So on that note, Africans were annoyed. In fact, Africans were being given what we call low standards of education. So that is why they demanded, they said that we just want education, Western education, the one that you are giving your people, we also want that. So that was also a key reason why these associations were formed. We also had, they wanted to present African grievances to colonial government. So wanted to prevent African grievances. They wanted to prevent African grievances to colonial government. Now, when you talk about grievances, here we mean the problems, the issues that were affecting Africans. So that is why they say that if we come together, we form associations, then we present, because we as Africans in Kenya, we are being faced with the same problems. What we can do, we can sit together, come up with a common stand, then take our issues, or rather raise our issues to the colonial government. just like I've mentioned, they wanted to continue keeping more livestock, or rather, they wanted. So I've said that they were against destocking policy. Remember, when the Europeans came, they demanded that Africans should keep a certain amount of livestock, and others were even being forced to reduce. So this policy was very harsh to Africans. So that is why, just like I've emphasized, for example, the UMMA, specifically the Ukambani Members Association, 1934, led by Mwidibingu, this association fought up to the last point. I think on the reasons or whys or aims or objectives, these were some of the major reasons. But just like I said earlier, the key, or rather the main reason, was that they were against land alienation or loss of land. Then, let us also look at the roles of early political associations in Kenya before 1939. So, the roles. So these roles, we can call them the roles, or alternatively, we can also use the word duties. Duties of early political associations. Duties or roles of early political associations in the struggle for independence in Kenya. Independence in Kenya. So we want to see, how did they assist Kenya to realize their full independence? You know, just like I said during the other previous lessons, that Kenya did not attain independence on a silver plate. Kenya fought tooth and nail. Several people died just in the line of assisting Kenya to attain independence. So some of these people, the struggle for independence in Kenya began all the way in 1920, when the first association was formed, that is the Kikuyu Association, by mostly chiefs from Kiambu County. So on that note, what were some of the roles? Number one, they unified Africans, united Africans. They united Africans to fight for their independence. They united Africans to fight for their independence. I want to state here clearly that even where you are, in your house, in your community, in a country, if you want to defeat a common enemy, you must be united. If you disintegrate, then your enemy will defeat you. So even as you are in primary school, make sure that as you forge ahead, you will be a member of the community. Make sure you remain united as a community, as a country, so that you can defeat any enemy that will come around. So unity was very important. They emphasized on unity. Then we also had they fought for workers' rights. Fought for workers' rights. They fought for workers' rights. They fought for workers' rights. When I talk about the rights, I'm talking about the time that Africans were working on the farm, the working conditions, for example, the low wages or poor remuneration, they were against that. They also educated Africans on their rights. So they also offer the educated Africans, they educated Africans on their rights through political rallies and speeches, for example, and speeches, and even newspaper articles, like Jomo Kenyatta wrote a newspaper by the name Muguidania, that means facing Mount Kenya. So on that note, Africans were made aware for their political rights. They also defended African culture and traditions to the latter. So we just talk of they defended African traditions, they defended African traditions and culture. They defended Africans' traditions and culture. How many minutes? Hello, sir. Gap in the back. Or just to like 3 minutes. Now, they expressed African feelings. They expressed African feelings to the colonial government. They expressed African feelings to the colonial government. They expressed African feelings to the colonial government. So on that note, I just want to urge you that because of time, what I want you to keep in mind when we are tackling this topic, just like I said earlier, number one, you must be able, when you are tackling this topic, you must be able to keep in mind the following. Early political association, number one, that is early political associations in Kenya before 1939. These are the main, number one, keep in mind the following, or rather let me call them NBs, important point. Number one, keep in mind the reason, that is the main reason. So the reasons for formation, and here on reasons I want you to emphasize on the key reason. Then number two, I also want you to emphasize on the roles. From the roles, just like I promised earlier, the members, I'll be telling you where you can get the notes and copy on the members of these early political associations. So, what else? So next time, during our next lesson, when we meet, probably, inshallah, we shall now be tackling one by one all the political associations that I wrote, except the Ukambani Members Association, because we must strictly follow the syllabi, or rather the syllabus. We shall be looking at the Young Kikuyu Association, the East African Association, the Kikuyu Central Association, and the Kavirondo Tax Welfare Association. As I conclude, I want to encourage you just to follow the rules from the Ministry of Health. Make sure you use your sanitizers. You use your sanitizers frequently. Make sure that you observe social distancing and generally observe hygiene to the latter. Thank you very much, and may God bless you abundantly.